Quiet, please. The show worth missing Under the Dome in 24 4. Just kidding. You can watch it later. It's okay. Welcome. This is Our Android Week with Alan Furstenberg in New York, Bruce Turner in Lynchburg, Virginia, Duke Carrico in Kingsport, Tennessee, Cadeas Kalut in Newport Beach, California, and in Menifee, California, Pam Adger keeping us straight. This is Our Android Week. Welcome. I am Dan, your host, aka Jack Bauer. I do have a Jack Bauer connection, I must say. In the episode 4 of the Fox series Touch, one of my newspapers is used as a prop. So I'm kind of just like Jack Bauer. Not really. All right, so anyway, but that did happen. Okay, so our first story, Alan, is about the Samsung Gear, a recent fail. This is a last-minute edition, right? Apparently, all is not well with the Samsung Gear.
Well, with the
which is
Samsung Gear
sold
Live.
now. It's sold dozens, right?
No, Dan, we're not talking about the Gear. We're talking about the Gear Live.
Which is the Android Wear iteration of
That's correct.
the Gear. And
Yes.
also, if you could do a quick update on your LG G Watch, what you think of it after. Obviously, you're colored because you have glass, so it's kind of duplicative, right?
So why don't we actually cover the story that we have in the notes first, and then I can answer some totally unrelated questions. How does that sound, Dan?
That sounds good. This is from watches. I just thought you could, since you have a G Watch that we all covet.
Dan, have you looked at the show notes? Just about the entire show is about watches.
Okay.
Just if you look at the show notes.
Just saying.
Just saying.
Do you have a grade 4?
Yes. So news has been coming out since last week that people who have the Gear Live are experiencing some problems with it. And apparently the way that it sits on its charging stand or gets attached to the charging stand, that attachment is breaking, which is kind of remarkable considering you'd think that this is Samsung's, third attempt, Cadeas? At a watch, you'd think they'd get it right this time.
Yeah, I would, but
this is Samsung. Yeah.
Right.
So apparently a number of people are having pieces of the watch breaking off, trying to dock with the charger, and it's not able to dock, so it's not able to charge. Some of them have experienced some good luck talking to Google and getting a replacement on the way. And some have had a miserable time talking to Samsung about the problem. So, once again, Samsung, kudos to you.
All right, so this is a rare Samsung fail.
Yeah,
Being charitable.
very.
It could be very expensive, right? If they have to, do a recall.
I wouldn't bet on a recall. They're probably just going to replace the pieces bit by bit as they come in. Because not everyone is experiencing these problems, but enough people are that it's clear there's an issue here somewhere.
Okay, so I guess Amazon has launched a dedicated storefront for wearables, and we're seeing a lot of them now, right? We got the Moto 360, we got the G Watch, and I'm guessing there are rumors that Apple, pretty solid rumors. I'm hearing that Apple's going to come out with an iWatch or whatever they call it. That this is the next thing. This is the next. Just like 4K TV presents an opportunity to get a bunch of consumers to buy a new television set. This gets people to buy a watch. An entire generation that has abandoned watches to a large extent, with the exception of Craig Shipp, of course.
I really want to know how you can turn every single story into a story about 4K.
I think it's relevant. I think it's a comparison. We've all abandoned. Nobody's buying watches. Nobody's buying a new television set. We're all waiting for 4K. We're all waiting for the smartwatches.
Nobody's waiting for 4K.
Dan, 4K's already here.
I know. I went to Costco. I saw it, so I know it's real now. It's a thing.
Costco.
Costco rocks, yeah.
Anyway, yes, Amazon UK now has a dedicated storefront for selling wearable devices. This include various Android devices, Pebbles, other stuff that they expect are coming out there, all of the fitness wearables, all of this stuff that's out there. They've now made a dedicated storefront for it. And now I'm suddenly curious. Does Amazon have a dedicated storefront for 4G TVs? 4K TVs?
Pam, you are not a fan of the wearable thing in general, correct?
I'm still trying to figure out which story we're on. Are we on the
We're on
Amazon storefront, or are we on the watch story?
We're on the Amazon storefront, or we're on the 4K TV story.
Oh.
We're on the wearables.
So wait. So we jumped right over the Samsung fail thing? I mean, that's over that quick?
Well,
Holy crap!
They failed, Pam. Where else can they go from there?
That's true. Yeah, okay. Storefront. Amazon.
I mean, we can keep beating up on Samsung if you really want.
I could
you
get
know,
like some sort of stuffed animal or something.
Yeah, look, I worked in quality control. All right. Now, granted, it was for diagnostic devices, which are a little more rigorous than
one would hope.
watches you give away at a conference, but still, I would assume that they did some testing of the freaking connection. Look, it doesn't work if you go. It doesn't work if you have your little watch and you're like, that doesn't work. You gotta jam it in there, and you gotta knock it off the bedstand, and you gotta do all this other stuff. And if they're not doing that, then that's their fail, right?
Well, they were just waiting on Amazon to do that, Pam. When Amazon gets them in their little storefront, they were waiting on them to
I can tell you that I see issues myself. I see issues myself with Samsung. I have my Note 2, one generation before Pam's Note 3, and last night I plugged it into the computer when I got home. I woke up and I had it was off, and I turned it on. It was on 2%. It never charged. So I'm not sure what the deal is, but yeah, there are issues. I'm not sure if that's a USB. I mean, it could be my computer, or it could be the phone, or it could be the battery was low anyway,
or it could be the fact, and this is a well-known problem with USB connections, is USB connections suck.
Yeah, I knocked my Note 3 while it was plugged in off my desk, which at work is about maybe 3 feet off the ground, onto a carpet. And now I have to be very careful to stick my charging plug in, and I had to actually bend the charging piece a little bit.
That's a huge fail. These things should lock. They should go in there. They should lock, and they should be like really reliable. You know what I mean? This is a ridiculous oversight that this exists.
No, it's deliberate.
Why is it deliberate? Are you a conspiracy theorist?
Because that's how micro USB ports were designed.
Well, mine isn't
plugged and unplugged a billion times.
Mine isn't a micro USB port. It's this big plug-in thing.
Oh, so yours is a USB, micro USB 3 port.
Yes, USB 3.
I like that they moved away from every phone having a proprietary connection. I like that. You used to go to Walmart, there'd be 50,000 different things, and you try to find the one, they didn't have it. There's an empty, pole where your thing would be if it was there. So I like that they went universal, and they're all similar now. But at the same time, it's ridiculous that these things don't lock in there and work reliably. It's important. What if you're trying to call 911 to report a bear in your yard? Hypothetically. Not that they would even come. So there's that. Okay, so
So Pam, are you gonna head over to Amazon's wearable technology store and browse the latest world of wearables?
I know.
So you're not into wearables at all, right, Pam?
No, I have a freaking computer I carry around in my pocket or my wallet. What the hell would I need? First of all, I get maybe 2 texts a week. I get 0 phone calls a week. I get maybe a phone call a month, and it's usually my dentist or my doctor saying, "Hey, your appointment is." So I don't need the watch, and I don't need glass in order to browse Google Plus on my break. Or take pictures. I just don't, you know what I mean? I just don't, I don't see the expense. Personally, it's not worth it for me.
How do you and Rodney communicate? Other than in person. I mean, like, if he wants to send you something like let's meet
there's a
somewhere, let's have
text-
meatloaf
yeah,
or whatever.
There's a text waiting for me right now from him, actually. We do text. Yeah. So, but, it's rare. We communicate in the morning. He gets up to go work at the school. We talk in the morning, and I'll stay up and wait for him to come home from work. So we'll talk at night. So I just don't need it. Our kids are grown. Maybe if our kids were little and little Johnny, had to contact me every day, or the babysitter or something, but I don't have any of that. And I hate talking on the phone. So, and everyone knows it. They call me a couple times and they're like, "Okay, that bitch doesn't want to talk on the phone," and they won't do it again.
No, Pam is absolutely right. There are a large number of people who are not going to need a wearable. Just like there are a large number of people who, quite honestly, don't need the smartphones that we have today. Just like there are a large number of people, one of the things that I think the wearables are heading for, and I've said this before, I'll say it again, and I think it's good, is that we're going to get away from this one-size-fits-all concept of mobile computing. And we'll have people that actually get what they need, not get the device that looks cool.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of it's akin to screen sizes. Samsung is in a desperate bid to find the perfect screen size, but really,
no, they're not. Samsung is in a desperate bid to find every screen size.
I think it's a lot like that famous article about the spaghetti sauce. Not article, the speech at TED about, it's one of the most famous, most viewed TED speeches ever. And he said there's not, this guy was hired to come up with the perfect spaghetti sauce. And he said there is no perfect spaghetti sauce. Some people want mushrooms, some want onions. Some, the secret is 17 different spaghetti sauces. And then you can capture the market. And so I think Samsung's doing the same approach. And wearables are going that way. I mean, there's glass, which is received mixed reviews. There are a bunch of different wearables coming out, and they're already on the scene. You have one, and I do want an update on that. Alan, I mean, now that you've used it, obviously your use case scenario is different because you are a glass explorer, so there's some duplicative notifications here. There's really no point in having both, I guess, right? Or maybe you can correct me if I'm wrong. But now that you've used your LG watch for a week or 10 days, or have you? Can you update us on that?
I'm still wearing it. There is most definitely a need to use both.
Really?
Oh yeah, they're each much more useful in different circumstances. The fact that this has incredibly poor voice recognition, while Glass has very good voice recognition in comparison. The fact that I can use Glass totally hands-free. This requires two hands to operate on a good day.
Is the bad voice recognition a result of the proximity to your mouth versus Glass, or is it because the hardware sucks?
Well, that's part of it. They're both using the same voice recognition backend ultimately, but Google Glass is tuned for specific commands, while Wear is not. Every single command gets sent to Google for processing, while a number of commands for Glass can be processed on Glass itself. So the fact that Glass can respond faster to some commands than Wear can, that's a big deal. There are other things that Wear is good for. Don't ask me to come up with any at the moment because I'm not sure I could. But it's cheaper.
7 times cheaper.
Yeah, about that.
And it's the first iteration, right? It's literally the very first Android Wear device. Of course, you had the first
Glass device.
Aren't you on version 3 or something? Or I mean, there have been updates.
It's essentially the same device.
Okay.
I mean, in the same way that, the Gear Live is essentially the same device as the Gear, or at least one would think that it was, but it's not. Do I like it? Yes, I like it. I still wear it. I wear it around the house because that's where it's most useful to me, because that's where I don't wear glass. Glass is still most useful to me when I leave the house because that's where it's most useful to me. There are lots of things that I can do on glass that I cannot do on wear, and very few things that I can do on wear that I cannot do on glass.
Except afford it. For Joe Consumer, right? Sally Consumer. Do you think?
So we'll get to that story later.
Okay. Yeah, it is on the list here. Okay, so one of the things I know, Alan,
but no, it's a valid point. Yes, wear is a less expensive device, and that will certainly get some appeal to it. But again, glass is not a consumer device yet.
Indeed. It's just been banned in UK theaters by morons who don't understand that your face would melt off if you actually were able to record a 2-hour movie with glass. Next up, I know, Alan, you travel some, and there's a new security precaution that to prevent bombs in fake phones, I guess, is the Reader's Digest version of this. Now you're required to activate your device when boarding an aircraft. I haven't flown in probably 20 years, but I used to fly constantly as a kid. For the first 15 years of my life, I flew, 30 times a year. So I have not been subject to the modern TSA requirements, but we're in a new age, a new time. So what do you think about this? This seems to kind of make sense. What are your thoughts, Alan?
This is so not news it isn't funny. When I was
thinking,
when I was flying 20 years ago, I'm trying to remember when I first started flying with a laptop, and I can't quite remember. But it was about 20 years ago. Maybe it was a little less. When I first started, I think you might have been born then, Cadeas. When I was first flying with a laptop, they made me turn the laptop on every single time I went through security. And yes, I could have been smuggling explosives in there, even with one that turned on. So it wasn't a wonderful check, but it was a reasonable precaution. It actually kind of surprises me to learn that they didn't make sure that that phones could be turned on before now.
But as much as I fly, I've had I wouldn't say 100% of the time, but I've had them say change the screen for me just to make sure it was an actual working device. That's why I was shocked this was even in the news. That I guess maybe it's just a blanket all places or whatever. I was shocked that this was actually in the news because I've always gotten on a plane and been told change the screen just to make sure that it was a working phone. So I don't know.
I've never had my phone. I've never had them ask me to turn my phone on or verify that it's a real phone, but it, as a possibility, it seems like a real thing to request. It doesn't surprise me all that much. On the other hand, if I wanted to have an explosive that goes off at or inside security, tying that to a smartphone is also a reasonable thing to do. So I'm not entirely sure that's a wise move, but hey, I'm not security anymore. There's a good reason for it.
I'm guessing that what this is an existing policy that was just common sense, like you both have said, and that they've run into some circumstances where someone happened to have a phone that wasn't charged, and they want to put an alert out, like, hey, we're doing this now, or we're continuing to do this now, and that make sure your phone's charged so you don't have to have a delay, and go to some bank of chargers or whatever, or I don't know. It's like I said, it's a new age we're in, and it sucks. But I would rather
Again, like
go
we
through
said,
this than
this
have
isn't
my
a new
plane blow up.
policy, so it's not a new age. There's nothing new about this. Nothing new about this.
Okay. Any other thoughts, Pam? Traveler?
Um, Not really, no. Personal opinion is a device that actually has a live battery in it and is altered for nefarious purposes is probably more dangerous than one that doesn't. But um, I am wondering if other devices like medical devices will also have to comply with the same standard, or plug-in devices, plug-in medical devices, or stuff like that, or is it simply phones and computers and stuff like that? I mean, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I would guess that you would actually trigger more of an alert or more suspicion or whatever you want to call it if you showed up with something they're not used to. If you show up with an iPhone or an S3, then they're used to that, or laptop, right? If you show up with strange gear they're not used to, I'm guessing they're going to say, hey, can you, Pam, can you slide over here to their tent next door and, break out the gloves or whatever, you know what I mean? That sort of thing, if it's out of the ordinary.
Yes, if it's out of the ordinary, but there are quite a few medical devices that are not out of the ordinary, but you have to carry them on. You know what I mean? They're not. They're. But the TSA seems to be pretty used to it. So.
Like an oxygen tank, for example, if someone.
Well, oxygen is a special case. Although they do allow that on the plane or whatever, there is, you do have, I believe you have limits as to what you can actually carry on the plane. That in the seating compartment, everything else has to go into the below the deck compartment. I'm talking about things like CPAP machines,
Mm-hmm.
or insulin pumps, or there are some other drug pumps that people have to wear, whatever. So those things are known to the TSA, but again, they are not any less susceptible to tampering than your laptop or cell phone. So I would assume that the same scrutiny is being given to those as well. Although it wasn't really mentioned in the article, was it, Alan? No. Kadea says.
I don't think so. But when you're writing a sensationalist article, why would you mention
It's not the only
something
article
that
out
is
there.
sensationalist?
Right, but it's not the only article out there about this issue. It's been all over the news. So, yeah.
All this is a pain in the ass, and I've talked to one of my nephews. Said he's done this and he's done the whole all but a cavity search, and he says it sucks. And I remember talking to a fire marshal, and it's kind of a similar situation where they're really anal about codes and stuff, and people bitch about it. But he said, when there's a fire and someone dies, I've got to go to that building, and I look at my name on the form that says I approve this building, and there's someone's dead, and so yeah, I'm going to be anal. So it's a new age, and not new. I mean, it's since 2001 and even before then, really. But that was the wake up call. But so it sucks. But I don't know an alternative, and I wouldn't want to be that fire marshal if he had approved something and was trying not to be too much of a hard ass, and then somebody's dead and he has to show up the night of the fire and that'd be pretty rough, and that would make him be a hard ass in the future. And I think that's that's why a state police trooper gives you that stop sign ticket or running the red light ticket.
So basically, just if you're heading over to the Amazon wearable technology store, make sure you have your phone a little charged before you get on the plane.
Absolutely. Okay, so next up is the LG. The G Watch is available from AT&T starting July 11th, which is just 4 days, for $229. And I guess it's, I'm not sure what this is saying, Alan. Less 50% discount if you also buy an LG G3.
So
That's
basically,
the
if
phone,
you
right?
upgrade,
You get half off
yeah,
if you couple it with a phone.
yeah, if you upgrade or buy a new line or whatever, you get 50% off the cost of the LG G.
So is this a good deal? Is this going to be a huge seller, or are people waiting for the? I'm waiting for the
LG
Moto 360.
For people who want the LG G, yeah, that's a good deal. 50% off.
The 229 is not a good deal because that's what you can get it at the Play Store right now. So, that's a sucker's deal.
It's the same price.
If you're buying the G3 anyway, you might as well plunk down $110 and get this great deal on
Well,
the
but
watch. But you've had it, Alan. So I mean,
here's the thing, though. You got to remember when the the Samsung Gear first came out, they were desperately trying to give them away. So yeah, in comparison to that, no, this isn't a good deal. But I can't imagine them actually giving away these things. Well, wait a minute, they did, didn't they? Anyway, what were you saying, Dan?
okay. So at I/O, you guys had your choice, right, of the G Watch or the Samsung, and then you're all also going to get the Moto 360. So can you update us on kind of after a couple days? I mean, obviously it was only based on whoever you spoke to and if the conversation came up, but the Samsung versus the LG version, what most people got, what most people liked, and are most people waiting for the round one? I think that's the next thing on the horizon, right?
Well, here's the thing. I think most people who are excited about Wear are not waiting for the Moto 360. They, foolishly plunk down money to get it or to be at I/O to get it. I think the big stories today are people are changing watch bands, and people are loading in software, and people are complaining about the charging on the Samsung. That's about the stories today. I still maintain it's been about 50-50 went to each of the watches that are available right now, and people are liking them. I mean, they're decent. It's a decent product when it works, if that's what you want.
You're, we're definitely not taping a commercial for wearables.
If you want me to look, do you want me to give glowing reviews of wearables? I can give glowing reviews of wearables.
No, I want the honest opinion.
I think, honestly, I think Wear is an excellent product. I think it's revolutionary. I think people don't understand it. I think there are people who are developing for it that still don't understand it. It's going to take us a while to figure it out. But
And it
I
sounds
think
like the hardware has to catch up, though.
No, what do you mean the hardware has to? I mean, aside from a manufacturing flaw, which Samsung should get
You said that the voice recognition sucks. That's a key part.
Yeah, but I think that's. I think the bigger issue is an understanding how people are going to use this. Have I run into problems using Wear? Yes, I have. I think there are issues, and it's not a perfect piece of software. But I think they got 90 to 95% of it correct. And I think it's well on the right track to being the right piece of software for this form factor. And if you don't understand that fact, and far too many Android developers don't, you better learn. You better learn now.
Absolutely. By the way, Alan, I
Yes,
see on
Dan.
your lower third, if somebody wants to buy a book about glass development, what book might they purchase? And how would they do that?
I would strongly recommend Designing and Developing for Google Glass by Alan Furstenberg and Jason Salas, available from O'Reilly Publishing.
Now, how did we determine it was Furstenberg and Salas and not Salas and Furstenberg?
Alphabetical.
Version 2.0 is going to be Salas and Furstenberg, I think.
No, Jason. In fact, it was Jason that said that it needed to be Furstenberg and Salas. I didn't care.
Okay. because you're democratic with a small d.
No, because there are other important things in life, and whose name is first on a book is not one of them in my mind.
Okay, so any other thoughts on the LG G Watch? And by the way, there's like 10 of you watching. If you want to comment or question or whatever, feel free. I think we have one comment so far, thanking Pam, that I see. Maybe I'm missing something. Okay, so next up is Samsung to shut down its video and media hub.
Woo! Yeah. We're so happy. Shut one of this more stuff down. Let's shut it all down, Samsung. You don't need to make software.
It should all be Play Editions available at the phone company store or Google Play, whatever. They should get rid of all these stupid wrappers, and these ridiculous attempts to try, But I guess they're still working with a third party to sell content, and they'd be dumb not to try to sell content. But this was a fail. I've never ever bought anything from either. I have a note too. Pam, you can address this because you have a Samsung phone as well. Do you ever use the Media Hub? My only interaction with this, Pam, is sliding the notification to accept their terms of service every single day. At least once or twice, I have to slide that because I could give a damn.
I have never had to do that either. I have no idea why you do. But anyway, that being said, the only interaction I have is when it asks me, do I want to update the software? If it gets rid of the hub, will we then just have MGO service as the replacement bloatware, or will hopefully this disappear from our phone and we never have to see it again? Do you know? Anyone? Either Dan or Cadeas? I mean, Alan or Cadeas?
No, we don't know. But hopefully it just all goes away. Any comments to that, Alan?
I have less than no comments on that one. So I think we might as well just move on to the next subject. Speaking of of vendors taking over the look and feel of something, it sounds like that Google is going to be asserting UI and UX control about Android Wear, and presumably the rest of the Android Everywhere tool set. What do you think of that, Cadeas?
I think that is good. This is what I'm calling for. Force people from stop putting all this junk on people's devices and such. So yes, this is definitely a good thing.
There are some things I like about the wrappers. Like, for example, on my Samsung Note 2, there are times when it has like a .com button, which I don't have in the generic Android. But for the most part, I prefer the generic Android experience. And what this is about is the actual circle and stuff that's in it, or the square, is going to be dictated by Google. Now, they're allowed to do certain things, which are normal. Like if Sprint sells it, they might want to have an app preloaded that's just a typical app. It's not a wrapper. It's not a launcher. But they are going to. They've learned from their mistakes about the one biggest complaint about Android that's legitimate is all the fragmentation, Alan.
But Dan, here's the problem. You can't load software onto your Wear unless you've loaded it onto your Android device.
True.
So I can't buy my watch from Sprint and my phone from somebody else and have something show up on my watch.
That's right, because
silence falls over the room.
So I'm not sure why. Was this a BS story?
No, this is a real story. This is basically Google saying there's pretty much nothing that you're going to be able to install on your Wear device that they're not going to assert some control over through the Play Store. So they're basically putting the Play Store back front and center into all of Android.
So you can either, do an Amazon and try to create your own thing, or you can use this free on their, under their terms, Android Wear system. And we saw what the previous forms of smartwatches have done. And the Pebble had some success. The Samsung was a dud. but Android Wear looks like the real deal. And it's just really the only question is, do you want a rectangular one or do you want a round one? You know, do you want the Samsung one or do you want the LG rectangular? Or do you want the round one from Motorola? And on the previous story, just one quick comment on Samsung shutting down their video hub and the media hub. It's kind of like when you go to a local television station website and you see some ghetto video player and it's just atrocious and you just wish they would just upload the thing to YouTube, because they're only making 10 cents from that freaking video if 1 million people watch it. So who cares about the revenue? If you're going to do it, let the people who know how to do video do it. And it's the same thing with this. You know, let YouTube and Amazon and Netflix and people like that do the media. Don't try to recreate the wheel, because that's not your specialty. Like that, you know, Meta, all we make are great copiers. Let those guys do what they do, because they do it right. And Samsung, it was just, I never used it. There was nothing appealing to me on that.
So, does this mean that again, it's going to be Apple's wearables versus Google's or Android's wearables, and everyone else is out of the game? That's pretty much what Google's saying here in this article?
I think so, yeah.
It's saying that you can't wrap your stuff around, you can't wrap the Sprint Zone experience around it and have a separate one here and a separate one here. It's going to be one thing, so everyone knows. We got a comment? Go ahead, Kadeas.
Unmute your mic for this.
Yeah, I got it. Wendell says that he's glad that they're going to keep control of the operating system, Android Wear, Android Auto, Android TV interfaces, because he likes consistency. And I think that's a good.
Here's my problem with all of this. And on one hand, I very much agree. You know, on the other hand, though, the only reason why Android is where it is now, in terms of its user interface, is because somebody was pushing it, and that somebody most of the time was Samsung, and occasionally it was, you know, SwiftKey. It was a lot of other third parties that were not Google and were saying things like, hey, your notification drawer looks ugly, we can jazz it up, let's jazz it up. Hey, your default keyboard is horrible, we can jazz it up, and they jazzed it up. Hey, your default skin looks like it was from the 1970s, we can do something, and they did.
But see, the difference is that HTC, Samsung was doing this out of the box and forcing people to take their stuff without giving people choices. So it's not necessarily locking them out.
But here's the thing. Google was also doing this stuff and locking them out. Just they were doing it with the default one that was about 2 years behind the times.
We've seen the same thing with Windows. I've seen, if you go to Walmart and you look at the, you know, I always look every couple of weeks. I look at the row of laptops and desktops for sale at Walmart, just for curiosity's sake, and you'll see some that say no bloatware. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, you can sell a Windows laptop. Now you have to pay for it, whereas with Android it's free as long as you agree to the terms. You know, you have to put the Play Store on there and stuff. But you're seeing the same thing with a Windows laptop. I mean, Windows is Windows, right? You can add different apps on there. You could install your own stuff in addition to Windows, but it's still basically the same thing. I could go up to anybody's Windows computer and probably diagnose an error or an issue for them. And I wouldn't have to worry about whether it's a Sony Vaio or a Dell or what have you, to a certain degree. But fragmentation with Windows and with Android is a legitimate complaint, and I think both are dealing with it. And it's a balancing act, Alan, like you said. I mean, you want to encourage innovation and creativity. At the same time, you want the base user experience to be the same. And well, this is a result of all the bloatware. This is a result of issues that have cropped up.
It is a reaction to all the bloatware, and it is a reaction to people who cannot design a UI to save their lives designing UIs.
Even though they have billions of dollars.
Right. and I don't just mean, Samsung. I mean, this is a problem out there that people who should know better don't. So I very much do understand why Google went this route, and on some level I agree with Google going this route. I think Wear is very finely crafted to make sure the UI is very carefully tuned. Glass, the UI is very carefully tuned. Auto, I could see the UI being very carefully tuned. TV, I think the TV team screwed up, but I'm trying to hold out my judgment on that one. But, what I want to see in the TV case, for example, I want to see people who actually know what in the world innovation means innovating on that platform, and I'm worried they're not going to be able to because Google's going to lock them out.
Auto obviously is a different scenario because lives are at stake. You have to proceed with extreme caution when you're dealing with something that could potentially distract a driver.
Yes, but I don't think Google necessarily has the lock on that understanding. I think there are people who may have a better sense of that than Google's designers even.
And it's they've admitted. I think there was an interview with Larry or Sergey where they talked about the driverless car technology, and they said it's very difficult. That and medical stuff is very difficult because it's so regulated. It's a tough nut to crack, And they are admittedly throwing spaghetti against the wall to see what works. And Larry Page said that he had this conversation repeatedly with Steve Jobs. He said, "You're doing too many different things." He said, "Well, that's our approach. We're trying a bunch of different things, and some's going to stick." So Samsung perhaps has a symbiotic relationship with them in that point, in that area, as far as throwing spaghetti against the wall. And we have another comment here from Wendell. As a Nexus user, I hate when I pick up a Samsung phone and have to relearn how to find settings on the thing. That's a valid point. And that's a point that Craig has made on our other program, Google Plus Week, which is Fridays at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, where we discuss Google Plus and general technology news for the week. Every Friday, 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific. And one of his complaints is about the fragmentation thing. So they're trying to deal with that. It's a balancing act. Like I said, you're trying to encourage innovation and creativity. At the same time, you're trying to avoid bloatware that pisses everybody off. And it's something that Windows has dealt with historically. When people would put, all this crap on their thing. So there we go. Okay, so next up is Google will keep, just kidding. Paid apps cannot be installed on Android Wear. Definitely want to hear Alan on this because he's an app developer. Play Store encryption likely at fault. And again,
by the way, that Cadeas is also an app developer. Just so we're clear on this point.
I stand corrected. A rare Dan correction on our Android Week.
At any rate, yeah, this seems like an interesting bug, and it came at a really lousy time over the holiday weekend. But what it sounds like is that paid apps that have an Android Wear component to them, the Android Wear component is not getting deployed due to the key signing and the checks that are in place involved in the key signing and how the Android Wear bundle gets attached to the main app bundle and a number of other factors. I expect we're going to see a major fix for this soon, like if we haven't already.
This is kind of a non-story, isn't it? I mean, this is just a temporary bug that they'll have to fix. I mean, it's not
it's a real story in the sense that this is a major feature that they rolled out at I/O 2 years ago. It's a major feature. Developers have been asking for it. This only affects paid apps. If you've got a free app, it works fine. And they didn't test it? I mean, for God's sakes. Is it really that tough to test these things before they deploy them? You'd think they would test paid apps because, developers want money from doing this stuff? Come on. I mean, this is where they trip over their own shoelaces again. Cadeas, your thoughts?
I agree with you on that. They need to get this straightened out. This shouldn't have even been an issue. And I guess it's good that we figured this out before it went mass, though, where everybody now right now it's just developers with the paid app or people that went to I/O that's got the Android Wear. So good thing they got this before, or at least they found the problem. So hopefully they have it fixed before it's mass sold everywhere.
I'm very
Without-
surprised that Alan would be so concerned about money, since on this, I think, very program 2 weeks ago, I gave him a 300 or 400% pay increase. It's never enough. And Wendell says, for TVs, I don't want to have to buy all the same brand just to get a consistent interface. I think a lot of the smart TVs, we're off on a tangent here, but not really. A lot of the TVs, I think Yahoo actually controls those apps. Like when you see the Netflix app and the Facebook app and the Twitter app and stuff like on a Vizio, I think it's actually developed by Yahoo, and they just sub that out. I could be wrong, but I think that's what's going on. And they're all ghetto. They all suck. So there's that. Okay, so you can't buy Alan's app yet, but you will be probably in a couple weeks, because no one bothered to test it. I think the same team that was responsible for Samsung's charger was responsible for that. Okay, next, an Android Wear app selection added to the Google Play Store, including a ton of updated apps. And this has since been updated. I think it was like 25 or something now. I guess it's like 35 or whatever. But Alan, just reiterate how it works, that you can't actually get an Android Wear app. You can only get an app that has a component for Android Wear.
Yes, but there are now apps in the Play Store, and these are flagged. I believe they have their own section that say they are ready to work with Android Wear. So you can install it from the Play Store. It will install on your phone and then automatically install on your watch. And if you've already got some of these apps, you'll be getting an update that includes the Android Wear, so it'll just magically start working on your watch if you have a watch, or when you get a watch.
I think that's a neat thing, because one of the things that guys like Craig Shipp say about iPhones is that they just work. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to be a hacker to figure it out, right? And I think that it's neat that if you just buy this thing and you pair it with your phone, that it's just going to work. And if you happen to download Flipboard or whatever app that has the watch component or the wearable component, that is just going to upload by itself and happen. And I think that that's neat. I think that approach that they did makes sense. So it's a good thing, as Martha Stewart would say, from Alderson, West Virginia. So, are you? I've seen a mixed review from you, Alan, about the LG G Watch.
So you want me to give my third review of the night?
No, I'm wondering, what about that? But you haven't talked about the specific apps. What are you seeing as far as the apps that you've experienced? I don't know if you've used Flipboard, or there's about 30 of them or whatever, and it'll grow by the time you guys see this. There'll be even more. But are you seeing good implementations there? Are you like, wow, this is really snappy and cool? Or are you like, oh my God, how much longer till they get it right? What's your reaction to these brand name apps that we're seeing?
The stuff I've seen so far has been decent, but not spectacular. I think some of the default apps are just utterly were implemented by people who did not understand the application. So the default timer app on Wear, for example, horrible implementation, just terrible. Others that I've seen and quickly uninstalled, and I can't even remember which ones now, really just don't get it. They still think they're installing it like they're installing it on a phone, and that I'm going to want to actually start their app when I almost never want to. Others seem to be working decently. Hangout Messages, I think, works really well, for example. Gmail works really well. These are things that I just sort of expected would work really well, and they are for the most part. Google Plus is a little bit odd, but works decently enough. In general, I think people are still feeling their way through it, but I think we're off to a good start on the whole, I think.
This is perhaps inappropriate, but I've read half of your book. I've copy edited half of it, and a lot of what you're saying about wear applies to glass development. Have you considered
Absolutely.
expanding? I mean, dramatically synonymous with what
I-
you've said
you-
about glass
you-
development. Have you considered what you know what I'm about to say?
Yeah,
Expanding the
you,
book.
you have to remember. If we take a step back, all of the sessions at I/O this year that talked about wear design were in conjunction with the glass team. A lot of this section on designing for wear on Android site was lifted verbatim from the glass design specs. So there's a lot of lessons that can be learned. And yes, we are looking into the best way to adapting the book so it discusses wear design principles as well, because we think the two of them go hand in hand.
I think glass and watches are wearables, and they've done that approach. I definitely think you should consider even renaming it. But that's a topic for probably a private conversation. But yeah, definitely, if you're thinking about developing for wear, I'm not just trying to give a shameless plug to Alan's book, but it's fascinating about the paradigm you need to enter to develop for a wearable. And initially they started with glass, and then wear came out, right? And so it's a whole different way of looking at things. It's not your standard app. This is not your mother's Oldsmobile or whatever. And it kind of applies to both of those things. So it'll be interesting to see how that book evolves. And that's one of the things that O'Reilly does is that they put out a first version, and then people can comment and suggest things, and then it evolves. And anyone who buys it can get each version as it's updated. Okay, next up is Android L. The developer preview has been ported to the Nexus 4, and this, of course, brings up the larger aspect of now that you've been thinking about and playing with this, Alan and Cadeas. Tell us about this relatively small topic, but bring the larger topic about Android L. What are your thoughts? What's, how big a deal is it? How big a change is it? I know there's the idea of the same Android experience on every device.
No!
Okay.
It's not the same Android experience in every device, and this is very important to understand. It's
Apparently.
the appropriate Android experience on every device. The Android experience that I have on my watch is going to be very different than the Android experience I have on my phone, assuming this was actually a phone that could support Android L, which it isn't, but that's another story. It's going to be different than the one on my car. From a user's point of view, they are, will be, and should be
He's disappeared again.
whoever, is that it, damn it. Am I
Okay, you're back. You're back, Alan. Go
Or did I
ahead.
get cut off? Where in my rant did I get cut off?
I hate it should be, especially in your car, and then you froze. I hate when you disappear right in the middle of ranting against me, because it appears that I have somehow sabotaged your connection, which I have not.
We'll discuss that another
Despite
time.
all of my skills, I have not done that.
The big deal about Android L is that it's so well able to adapt to all of these form factors. That's the important part. Not that it's going to be the same Android experience everywhere, but that Android can adapt to all of these experiences. That's the important part about Android L.
Well, that was a poor choice of words on my part. What I'm referring to is that video where they showed interconnectivity, things like it's just an extension of things like if you do a search on Google Chrome on your desktop for directions to whatever airport or whatever farmer's market you want to go to, and then you get in your car and it realizes you want to go there, and it says that it's kind of like that on steroids. At least the video that they showed with the guy and his dog, racing around and winning a prize or whatever. But I agree. Yeah, obviously the you wouldn't want like a YouTube video playing on your dashboard of a car. I mean, that would not be safe. You know, there are limitations, and you don't have the screen real estate on your watch that you would on a desktop screen, and things are rightly different. On your desktop, you get the real full experience. On your phone, you get a limited experience designed for mobile, the most important things, and with limited real estate, and even more so with a wearable. So they are different, but I think they seem to be tying things together, the important bits, as one UI, and they seem to be clamping down on trying to get a universal experience. So it doesn't matter if you buy an LG or a Moto product or a Samsung product, we're getting toward universal feature sets so that you could go up to anybody in a coffee shop and they could give you an assist on how to do something, because it's kind of the same thing regardless of what manufacturer produced it. And I think that's a big step to deal with one of the main complaints about fragmentation. So what else as far as L? And I guess we don't know what nickname they're going to come up with. Maybe they'll do another manufacturer tie-in like they did with K with KitKat. I don't know what L brands are there. Licorice? Android licorice, I guess. You heard it here first, folks. But it's you were there as they talked about it. How do you compare ice cream sandwich to from Jelly Bean to ice cream sandwich to Kit Kat to L? How big a deal is L, Alan, compared to?
I've heard Lollipop. Pam? Is that really going to be the name Lollipop, or is that just some rumor going around?
That's been a rumor going around for a while.
Ah, okay.
But Key Lime Pie was the rumor going around for a while, right? We don't know. It's all depends on who on Madison Avenue answers the phone and agrees to a deal. So we really don't know. I think you're just...
Well, Lollipop isn't really a brand, right? As just like Jelly Bean wasn't really a brand. Jelly Bean's a thing. It's a tangible piece of candy, but, you know.
Yeah.
Kit Kat was the first brand.
I think that they're onto something. I think it was smart, although I never did see a Kit Kat bar for sale with an Android logo. But it caused a whole bunch of people to talk about it. So it wouldn't surprise me at all if they went with some sort of dessert-themed brand that starts with an L, and did it with this Android version. But how big is it, Alan? I mean, is this... We've all said that when they went to ice cream sandwich, that was the biggest advance that put them on a par feature-wise and UI-wise with iOS. How do you rate L compared to, ice cream sandwich and Kit Kat?
Well, particularly, I'm liking the material design is what I'm really liking about it. I like that they're going back to the drawing board on the way apps should look and be built, and so I like that. That's what I like about it. I definitely can't wait for this to become mainstream and be used everywhere, because the way you build apps and the way you look at apps is now in layers as opposed to the way it was set up before, where you had the drawer and the whole 9 yards. So I'm liking it.
Can you in terms that Pam and I will understand, explain the difference between material and this is like when object-oriented first came out, and someone had to sit. My brother-in-law had to sit me down and explain OOP versus conventional. Can you in
as
terms that humans can understand?
Yeah, as opposed to how do you simplify this? As opposed to when you're using an app right now, pretty much a lot of your interface is going to be either there's 3 lines on the left side or 3 dots on the right side, and so you're kind of navigating that way. If you look at Google Plus, the new Google Plus app on Android now, you will see that it doesn't quite function that way anymore, and it functions a little differently. Like, for example, you have a circle that's going to be front and center, that basically that's how you write, and that's kind of out there and it's floating and it's in your face, but there's still things behind it. And as you scroll through your stream, there's still things behind it. So it's just everything's really layered, and it gives a different type of. How do you explain material design in a simple form, Alan?
Material design basically says take a piece.
Okay. He might come back in.
On the way paper looks and behaves.
I'm sorry, Alan. Can you start over? You broke up on word 3.
Material design is based on how actual paper, physical paper, looks and behaves. You should be very familiar with it, Dan.
I am. I buy ink by the barrel and paper by the ton. Literally.
And literally, that's the fundamentals of material design.
Like
The
$1,000
fundamentals
a
of
week
material-
I spent on ink and paper.
The fundamentals of material design basically boil down to our user interfaces should behave more similarly, at least metaphorically in some ways, but more similarly to how we actually handle real paper today.
So you think it's a good advance? Is it an advance? Or
Oh,
is
it's an advance. There are some aspects of it that I'm not entirely sure I agree with, but at least flat ugly in recent months and years. It takes those to a much better level by
So what's
actually
some-
acknowledging. Go ahead, Cadeas.
Oh, I was going to ask you what you were dropping out there. I was going to ask you what you said. There's some things you don't agree with. What don't you agree with? What's something that you don't agree with?
A lot of it takes up a lot of space, and some of the recommended ways of dealing with things take up a lot of space and eliminate some of the visual cues that we need to use to compensate for the in the medium. Did any of that come through?
Some of it did. I have to say,
Yeah, I got it. I got what he said.
yeah, I have to say that I'm in a forest with like blackberry or raspberries and black bears, and we invented the internet here in America, in the United States, and Alan is like one of the great developers of our time, published author, and he has. It's outrageous that internet in New York sucks so bad.
And actually, we'll be covering this on Friday. My internet here is actually fairly good, just my connectivity at the moment has problems.
But we should be kicking ass. We should be like NASA of the internet, right? We invented it, didn't we? This is one of the most embarrassing things in the United States. We invented this technology, and we have the shittiest
What
internet.
the F is that? It sounds like Alan has grown a frog.
He switched to his
Man's gonna
phone.
get in trouble for the emergency alert system that he
He's-
just broadcasted.
He's Alan has switched to his flip phone. So we should get some connectivity there. Okay, so next up is so we're all excited about L, and I really still don't understand exactly what the hell it's about. But hopefully they'll, as they say in Front Royal, they'll learn me over time. Okay, next up, the story you've all been waiting for, even more exciting than Under the Dome in 24. Google adds occasionally reminder option to Google Now. What's the story with this? Don't all speak at once.
Well, Google added occasional reminders, looks like. So it looks.
Breaking news from Cadeas in Newport
Oh.
Beach, California. Thank you for reading the headline to us. No, I saw this. Apparently, you can like. I really didn't understand it, nor did I understand the significance. I guess it was like, you have to publish 3 posts a day. So some guy did this story. You can do a Google Now reminder, which is Google's answer to Siri, and you can. I'm not sure exactly what occasionally means. I mean, like, remind me to.
It says, however, the specific interval is still a mystery. So yeah.
So that's our non-story story segment of the week.
Which is okay since we're running long.
That was a hint. Okay, so one thing I put it in Flipboard, I think, but I forgot to shoot. I don't even have it. It was I was going to do an app. It's a keyboard. It's the L keyboard. And why don't you tell us about this, Cadeas? Because when I looked at it, I saw your review on it, and you said this is the go-to keyboard. It's basically the Android L developer preview keyboard, and someone has ported it to be a standalone app. And I tried it today, and it's really cool. And the thing where you like the squiggly thing where you can go from letter to letter and spell a word works really well. And I have SwiftKey, the paid version, and it's not all that. It I have issues with it, but it's very popular. But what do you think? Should folks download should folks download this app? This the Android L version of the Android keyboard.
If you're a Google keyboard user, then this Android L keyboard's good for you. I didn't even know you noticed my review there. So, but yeah, it's good for you. I mean, it brings a different look to the keyboard, but it's still the Google keyboard that you know. It just looks different, something new to look at, really.
It's one of the most helpful features of Google Plus's social integration. They've had some fails. I mean, let's be honest here. We're fans of Google Plus, but they've done some things wrong and they've done some things right. And one of the neat things is when you go to look at an app review, if I see a review from Pam or from Alan or from you, then that is far more relevant to me than some random person, in North Dakota or India or wherever.
Yeah, but they still got it wrong.
Because I can put it in context.
But because I have to publish that publicly instead of sharing it with just my friends.
Yeah, but I mean, shouldn't a review be read? I mean, what's the point? Why would you waste the time to do a review if nobody could see it? This sucks because Alan's on a roll tonight and we can't hear him. Ground control.
Fine, so end the show.
So coming up Friday on Google Plus Week, which is at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific, post meridian, for all you cartographers out there. Some of the cool stuff we have happening is you can use Google, you can use Glass. Alan and Cadeas can steal your passwords. There's some boring story about New Zealand's ISP anti-geo blocking. I don't care. Facebook tries to explain the motives for their secret user experiments. Google's shutting down Orkut. The FTC is beating up on T-Mobile for cramming its users for years and years and making God knows how much money from it. Google Voice integration with Hangouts has been leaked. Google gently tells users to blame ISPs for poor YouTube performance. I guess they're copying Netflix's approach, making a point and then quietly removing it. Oh, sorry, but point's made, right? And a bunch of other stuff here, and this interview with Larry Page and Sergey Brin. So all kinds of interesting stuff. We skipped last week's Google Plus Week because it was Independence Day in the United States, where we celebrate our independence. And for our international folks, Lord Parker and Mr. Downs, you probably don't celebrate that there, but we do here with fireworks and stuff. It's an annual holiday where we look in the sky from 9 to 9:15 p.m. and look at fireworks. Google Plus Week is every Friday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern, 5:30 p.m. Pacific. This program is Our Android Week. It's at 9 p.m. on Monday nights. It runs opposite 24 and The Dome, Under the Dome by Stephen King, which explains our numbers. We thank you for watching and commenting. We really appreciate it. We all also thank you for engaging with us in the comments. That's awesome, and we love all of you very dearly. And we will see you next week. And until then, have a wonderful Android week. Thanks.